Join internationally acclaimed overland expert Paul Marsh and award-winning journalist Gregory Simpson as they delve into all things responsible overlanding. From choosing the right vehicle, getting yourself prepared, getting your vehicle prepared, safety tips, and much, much more. Only on Responsible Overlanding.
You take 2 or 3 or 4 vehicles in groups, and that the dynamics can be difficult. So that's why on short trips it kind of works. But I do say there's a lot of preparation around that, and it's a whole thing I like to spend time with groups or people going to travel together in vehicles, because you've got to actually discuss what are the expectations, what are our roles and responsibilities, how are we actually going to interact if there's a problem, if there's a situation, how are we going to manage this as a group, what if we have this situation. When you cover those bases, then you've got parameters in place, you've got a structure in place, which you need. Because if you don't, when something does happen, that's when the tension comes up, that's when the arguments start, that's when the pressure builds up.
So you've never talked about it?
You've never talked about it, yeah. So have those difficult conversations beforehand, so you actually can be in a much better space when something happens, that you can look at how you're going to actually manage this situation. How are we going to, what's the outcome we want? And then it takes away a lot of the stress, and it just manages it better.
Reminds you of the Canning Stock route trip you did with Andrew and other gentlemen.
So that was an amazing trip. We had 2 very good friends of mine, Justin and Laura, who actually are medical. Laura's a GP and Justin's a male nurse, and they work in the remote outbacks of Australia. So they were fantastic to have on board, because they really understood the culture, the Aboriginal culture. And they've travelled Australia extensively, and then of course the Canning is one of the great big routes to do. It's one of the routes I dreamt of doing for years, and the opportunity when Andrew asked me and we discussed doing it was just like, wow, this could be amazing. So it was a very good dynamic. We did talk about how we work, and they're also very easygoing people. So it's interesting because dynamics, we've got into a very good routine, and it's not easy when you're filming. It's actually it takes a lot of time and effort, and you need whoever's going to be with you to be very amenable to that. But we discussed that ahead of time. We put in place what the expectations were, how we were going to manage it, and what was important to allow Andrew to capture what he needed to, because at the end of the day this trip was happening around a number of support structures in place, and it was a team effort to sort of make the trip happen and really enjoy it. But the team has to work together and has to acknowledge what are the parameters we're working in, and what's the main goal, what's the main focus. We all took something out of it. Canning is an incredible, it's a very interesting part of the world to go and experience that. Very remote, very desolate, far from anywhere, relying on waterhole to waterhole, and crossing all these, over 1,000 dunes, I think. It was pretty incredible. I really enjoyed that. It was. And
riding shotgun was something when you used to sort of leading expeditions?
Oh, I don't mind. We shared the driving, and so we're both very good at that, and we both drive well, and we both respect each other's driving, we both care for the vehicle in the same way, and so it wasn't about that. It was actually about it wasn't a case of one had to dominate lead. This was about, we're going to make this happen together, and that was important.
That ties in with everybody knowing what their role is. Is it a democracy out there, or how do you delegate responsibility?
On small groups like that, it's you're looking at people's strengths and you're looking at what needs to happen. But let's talk about bigger groups, because bigger groups have more of a challenge. When you've got very big groups that you're working with,
personalities,
and that's the challenge. So and I've seen it on many expeditions that I've led and taken. You do get people who've got big personalities. Sometimes it's ego driven, sometimes it's fear, and you've got to understand where it comes from, because if you're an expedition leader, you've got to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your group. You also understand putting roles and responsibilities in place, and holding people accountable to those roles and responsibilities, because if someone falls back and they don't pull their weight, they become a weak link. And so in any team, if you talk about when we did Driven to Extremes in Siberia, we had minus 60 degrees. Okay, that's extreme. You know, to operate a vehicle at minus 60 degrees is, yeah, well, you know, we got to a point where we couldn't get help anymore. We were then self-reliant on our own abilities and everything else. To fly a chopper out was just too far. We just couldn't. That was the point, and that's quite a critical point. Is going, we can't get help from here forwards. We're going to now rely on ourselves. And when you're at minus 60, if someone does something stupid and puts themselves at risk, as what could happen on any trip when someone does something stupid, they go off and they race over a dune, or they don't think and they get their vehicle really bogged, or it puts the whole group at risk. And I think that's, you know, on some trips I've had to pull people aside and sit down and go, you know what, this is the whole group and you've just compromised the group. Now we're all having to pick up and sort out what you didn't think because you were careless. And I think, you know, if people understand, and that's where I think it's important to understand knowledge. Sometimes it's done out of ignorance and people just didn't know because they didn't have that experience. And other times it's careless. You know, and it is about managing that. And that's where good expedition leaders are worth their salt, because they understand what it takes to actually put a group together and look at the strengths of the group and manage the weaknesses and the problems that go along. It's like anything, you're going to get your ups and downs, you're going to have your problems, not always generated out of, you know, someone who's careless. It's a problem that's just emerged and you've got to deal with it. But good expedition leaders then can draw on the strength of the group to mend that back, to carry the group forward. And I think it's, you know, that's a big responsibility. I've done a lot of work with groups and big expeditions to actually prepare them, and it's important to get it right. I have a mantra that I say to people: take more knowledge and less kit, and I really mean that.
And travel light. And
travel light. Now that's quite hard to do, because often you're going into stores where people are there to sell you gear, and that's their experience, and they don't have the overlanding experience that maybe you're going to do. And so in their mind, you walk in and you're open to knowledge and you're asking for knowledge and experience, and they're going to sell you kit that you probably don't need, or maybe it's not the quality that you need. So it is important that you really understand what you need. And I work very closely with people, and I sit down with them and I go, okay, I need to understand your thoughts on what you think you need to take. Because it's easy to say, well, you should take this and you should take that. That's my experience. And people have different needs depending on what they want to do. So it's important for us to understand, what are your needs, how you're going to travel, where you're going to travel, and what do we need to put together. There's no one perfect solution for every scenario. You know, we went from minus 60 degrees to plus 60 degrees to the jungle in 3 separate expeditions in 1 year. And so the equipment we needed was varied between, you know, preparing a vehicle for the jungle and minus 60, it's very different. So there's no one solution, but what you do try and do is understand where are people going and how do they adapt and what do they absolutely need. So what's essential, what's pivotal to the survival of your trip? What are you going to add in? You know, whether it's warm gear, whether it's hiking gear, what needs to be added in? And then how are you going to manage that? And it's important then, I think, to address what you need and don't need. Because all too often, you know, you get carried away and it's more kit and more kit. And believe me, I've seen people arrive in an empty vehicle and go, oh, bring all your kit you're going to put in. And you know, I had 3 guys that were driving through Africa, or still in England, and they brought bootloads of stuff. And we just piled it on the floor, and I just looked at this and I thought, I just don't know how you're going to fit it all in. And they must have repacked their car, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 times. And eventually they had to acknowledge they were going to leave a lot of stuff behind, you know. So, I offer people, I say to them, listen, let's go and shop together if you need that. Or let's go through a very detailed list and let's work out and discuss, why are you taking that? Can this bit of kit be used for something else? Can you double up with kit? Rather go and do an initial trip. You should all do a test trip in your vehicle. Understand, you know, the vehicle, get familiar with how it's laid out, start to use your equipment, understand where it's going to be, where you're going to put it, and then see where the gaps are, you know, and then go from there. If someone's never traveled on expedition, and if we're building a vehicle for them, first off, you know, a new vehicle fully prepped, it doesn't matter who builds it, needs to have a test trip. A short test trip so you can snag it, you can test it, you can become familiar with it. That's really important. So I'd be saying to someone, take your truck and go and do a weekend or a week. You're close by, you don't need to go far. Live out of the vehicle, camp in and out, pack it, unpack it, pack it, unpack it. Get familiar, where is stuff going to go? Soon you'll figure out where you want to put things. We'll talk about where we might consider putting stuff. And the most important aspect of that is to find a home for everything that you can access. There's no point putting stuff, if you're looking to change a wheel and the jack's here and the wheel spanner's there and the warning triangles are there, you're unpacking half your car, and it could be a difficult, dangerous situation where you need to get the wheel changed quickly, So in my mind, that's important that that's in one place. And there'll be other aspects of your kit that you need to use. So that's a proper, important phase in testing your vehicle. As you do longer trips, you'll hone that down to a finer situation. There'll be some kit you find you need, some kit you maybe going to ditch. That's personal. People travel lighter and heavier than others, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong. It's not a right or wrong. It's more about understanding, if I'm taking this kit, will I use it? I don't want to carry a kit that I'm going to bring back and I find that it's not used.
And you must get a tremendous amount of feedback from clients on what kit works and what kit doesn't work.
Yeah, it's great. It's really good. You can't test all the kit on the market, and I've had some really good feedback and ideas from clients. I welcome that. It's brilliant because people do different things on their trips and they come up with different ideas, and there's a host of information out there that you can gather. One person came back and said, I've always struggled with my laundry, but I take a dry bag and I put my laundry in like a dry bag for kayaking, and I put some water in there and I clip it closed, and now I can shake it around and I don't need a fixed bucket or something. I can do lots of great idea. So little things come from expeditions, and I think what I always say to people is make sure it's always keep it simple, because you can get some really complex ideas to build into expedition trucks, and they don't always serve you. When it's complicated, it has a bigger chance of going wrong, and then you need to be able to fix it. So I always say it's important that if you are going to have something complex, understand how it works, and that's where the training comes back in. People need to understand the electrics on the car. You don't have to be a mechanic, but I'll encourage you to come and work in the workshops and do some work on the car so that you can change a fuel filter, you can adjust your V-belts, you can understand what needs to be done on a service, and then work with checklists. So I'm a great advocate of checklists, because then you're not going to forget something. So if you're going to have your car serviced, there's a checklist. Your daily checks or your weekly checks. This is what you need to do when you service the car. So when you've got a mechanic that you've chosen, and that's probably another little concept to talk about, but when you've got this, you can give it to him, this list you'd like him to go through, whether it's a Toyota dealership or whether it's a little mechanic that you found that you trust is going to work on your car, and you can watch him work. And you can make sure that the critical safety elements are checked off. So the safety critical elements, like wheels are tight, some plugs tight, oil filters tight, water's in the radiator. Those critical components, where you hear stories, people driven out of a workshop and the guy forgot to tighten the wheel, or there's some plug. And we've all had that. And I think the important part of those lessons is to put those checks in place, because you don't want that bad experience.
You got to check your own parachute.
You check your own parachute. Do I have a parachute?